Eric, our faculty director, is about to host our next conversation. So thank you for being here, Eric. It's great to see you. Love that background, man. Where'd you
James,
get that from?
it was. I know. I got it from a long drive. And by the way, like Bonin is always Bonin. He's amazing. That was great. Great
Yes,
session. Appreciate. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Couldn't have been better. All right, take it away, my friend.
All right. Thank you all. Really appreciate being here right now and getting going. My name is Eric Johnson, faculty director at UCLA Anderson, the MEMS program, and very involved still in the sports, media, music, entertainment space. As my background, I am delighted to have a conversation, a conversation that I may have had a few times, but I'm really interested to hear the latest from the past number of years with Cheryl Idell. Cheryl Idell is the Vice President of Consumer Insights with Netflix. Cheryl and I have known each other for a number of years, and we're going to have a conversation around the consumer shift and what becomes of the new word television. And I could not be more delighted to bring her on screen and start that conversation. Cheryl, it's great to have you. How are you?
Thanks. I'm doing great. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So, again, we've worked together for a very, very long time. You're working at Netflix now. You've worked at Snap. You've worked at Warner Media. You've worked at 20th Century Fox. You've even been on the entire research side with Nielsen, IAB. So, of all the people that I've known, like your understanding of what's happening in consumer shifts and changes and thinking about audiences and consumption are amazing. So maybe to start, could you talk a little bit about your career and maybe what the passion is within that career of what you've always been like learning about?
Absolutely. No, I'm happy to. First of all, I'll start out by saying this is my 6th day at Netflix. So that is very new, but very, very exciting for me. But my career really has always centered around consumer insights, understanding what consumers, what motivates them, who they are, especially as it relates to entertainment, how they use media, what does the changing media landscape look like, and also how they perceive and react to advertising. So it's sort of all of those pieces of advertising, tech, entertainment, and media. And I started out my career on the agency side of the business. And when you work at agencies, it's a great foundation because agencies really need to be experts very broadly in all forms of media and all types of consumers and all types of products. So that's really what sort of wet my whistle on because I was so curious and really understanding consumers and where they were heading and how to advise our clients about how to invest their money and how to see around corners about what was coming. And so after working at agencies for a good number of years, and I've been up and back between New York and LA twice, originally a New
Yep.
Yorker, moved to LA, back to
Same.
New York, back to
Same.
LA. And I also then went to work for both media companies. So as you said, because my clients were media clients, I worked on the Disney business, for example, for many, many years. I really became fascinated with entertainment marketing as really my specialty because introducing new content, understanding what kinds of content consumers wanted to see, and launching every piece of content, whether it's a new movie or a new TV show, has always been really exciting to me because it's different every time, right? And there are different motivators and different ways to communicate what that story is going to be and what that experience is going to be when you engage with that content. Years ago, we didn't call it content. That in and of itself is a new way of talking about this.
Yeah.
And then a big stop in my career was on the researcher side of the business. I spent a number of years at Nielsen, as you said, because I wanted to be a kid in that data candy store. I was in data before it was cool to be in data. I was a data geek long before people were proud to have data careers and insights careers. And I was really fortunate to have sort of started there. So I've done a lot of different things, as you've said, and I think the last few years, I've been very intentional and focused on staying very relevant and going to those places that were leading the charge in our industry, whether that was Snap and what Snap was doing for mobile, or Warner Media as they were launching HBO Max, and now Netflix, which obviously is Netflix.
It is. So we've both seen like reams of data of what's happening. So I'm going to start with like a kind of a grand conversation or a question. The idea of like from a consumer behavior pattern over the last 10 years, 5 years, last 9 months, what have you seen that has changed? And maybe when did that start to happen that has been accelerated currently?
Yeah. I mean, years ago, we used to always talk about someday consumers will be in control, right? So 10 years ago, even as little as 10 years ago, right? They really were not in control. We would put things out there to the masses very much, sort of one to many. And there wasn't a lot of control, whether it was in media about what you got to see when, or whether it was in shopping. Because even e-commerce 10 years ago was still pretty much in its infancy. And so there were only certain kinds of products you could control the distribution and how you accessed and bought those products. So what's really happened so quickly is, 10 years ago, only certain types of people who were sort of ahead of the technology curve would use the internet to purchase things or use the internet to stream or watch content. And most of it wasn't quite available. That's about when you and I met a little bit before that, Eric. And
Yeah.
in the last 5 years, we've seen obviously a lot of growth in that area, but still very hampered by technology, right? So content could only get distributed certain ways because the technology wasn't in place to have broadband as deeply into people's homes that you would need to stream the way that we're streaming this right now, or the way that you would stream a huge event. Same thing with all of the technology or the distribution that was needed for logistics, for e-com, right? Look at what Amazon has built in the last few years. So we needed the infrastructure of our businesses to catch up with consumer demand. And what's happened in the last 9 months is an acceleration unlike anything anyone could have anticipated. We all saw today coming in terms of how consumers would be purchasing things online and watching content and have control over what they got to see when. But nobody anticipated it happening in a 9-month period at the rate that it had to, right? We were forced into this.
That's right. That's right. And I think about 20 years of ESPN for me, and everyone was worried for so long about what's the OTT strategy in 2014. And it's like, well, it's not there yet. But there's a strategy. Trust me, there's like 5 strategies, but it's not there yet. And then the technology caught up, and then that is what we've seen that's happened in this space. So I'm kind of curious because of the title of this discussion is about the consumer shift and the impact on television. Cheryl, what is television in your mind?
Well, I mean, that's a great definition. And it may not matter what it is in my mind, right? It matters what it is in consumers' minds all over the world. And, is television this thing that is it this box that's behind me and the device that we use to get the content through? Or do we think that television is episodic or serialized content, right, that you watch multiple episodes of? And it's some combination of those things, because now I can turn that box on and I can watch a newly released movie, right? But it's not in a movie theater anymore. So these definitions have all blurred so much. When you go on to Twitch, right? It's also a platform to deliver some form of television, movies, promotional activity. So that's really what's changed. It's all blended together, right? The LA Times isn't just a newspaper, right? They also have podcasts and video podcasts. So it's all blended together.
So you mentioned previously the idea of how fast this has accelerated, like everything that has transformed in the last year. And these were all things that probably were going to happen anyway. It's just that we had this, if there's a silver lining of what we've gone through, silver lining is that it forced radical business model change that was probably coming anyway. So I want to ask you, from your perspective, and this is just fascinating to me, the idea of what did COVID and the pandemic bring up that are short-term solutions for every business model, every company, to make revenues in the short term, and what were the things that that you think are long-term effects of this is now just the new way it's going to move forward, and that's what's really interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of long-range structural change that, we can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? And we don't want to, probably, in a lot of cases. So I think things like the movie industry is in a phase of structural change. People will absolutely go back to movie theaters, but it will not be the same way that it was a year ago or 5 years ago. There will be different kinds of movies that will release first run in a theater versus on your television or some combination of those. That is a structural change. Fitness is a fascinating one to me. When you look at how many people, it's right. What is it? Invention, the necessity is the mother of invention. Sorry, that's the phrase I was looking for. Look at how many people this year have figured out how to work out at home, right? And so things like boutique fitness and big box gyms will not be completely the same because people have figured out a solution that's more convenient and works for them better. So I think that so many of these changes we've seen, the way that people watch television, right, has completely changed. Going back to, for scripted TV, to think there's going to be some pure lean back experience, right, that is linear, is not going to fully happen. And that's allowed all of these new services, the AVOD services, to really quickly ramp up to recognize this change.
Yeah, definitely so. And those habits are going to become the necessary new habits. And really interesting to think about that. So part of what's happening with streaming is, and it's become, there's a bifurcation of different strategies, right? There's OTC services like Netflix, which have no commercial ads. There's Disney Plus, same category. Hulu's very different. ESPN Plus, very different. Peacock, very different. Apple Plus, no ads. If I can put you back in your marketer hat, how do brands think about how to navigate this new space with the amount of time that's being spent across different platforms that maybe don't have that opportunity?
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges that marketers are facing. We already saw less and less time being spent with ad-supported content, and we saw a big disparity in sort of the who was watching ads and who wasn't, right? Older people were watching more ads than younger people. Lower income, lower socioeconomic groups, right, watching more ads than higher socioeconomic groups. And that's just becoming more and more, it's becoming more and more mainstream that you can find a lot of ways to watch content without ads, but there'll also continue to be, I think, a bigger disparity between the groups of people that are watching ads that are sort of forced upon them almost, if you will. So I think for most marketers, what they really need to do is understand, first of all, the distinction between that, right? Because it's easy to get lost in big numbers and see things like, well, my ad campaign is reaching 70% of the population, but that 70% of a population is probably very skewed from an age and socioeconomic standpoint. So you have to work even that much harder to get to the other groups of people that can very easily filter out ads. And what that means for marketers also is being I hate to use some of these stereotypical things, but being very savvy about data and doing everything they can in their power, and some businesses can do this better than others, to take control of their data and their direct customer relationships so that they can communicate one-on-one directly with their customers and use what they know about their customers to find others like them.
Yeah, do you think branded content becomes more important in that regard? it has been important for the last 5 years, but is it becoming increasingly important because of the dynamics of, the execution of how that marketing works? Or
Yeah,
are there other
I'm
things that people can do?
sorry. I'm a bit of a
Yeah,
skeptic on the branded marketing side of things. And again, I've done, I've worked in this area a lot. And I've done a lot of work
I
in it.
know, I know. That's
And
why I'm asking.
yeah, you've got to really have content that means something to people. And so consumers aren't going to just tune into your content that you've made as a brand. So I don't know that that's really the way to go. I think that having relationships that make sense when brands are embedded in content in a way that makes sense for them, the car that's being driven or the beverage that somebody's drinking, I think that's a way to put your brand in context that works for your brand, but it is not necessarily telling your story. But creating there, I think there are very few brands that can create their own content in a way that will be broad enough and sticky enough to matter to consumers.
So that becomes more about product placement.
Yeah,
Like the best piece of marketing in my mind in the last 2 years was on Netflix, which was Formula One Drive to Survive. It was a great, essentially documentary series, 8 episodes. And after watching it, not being a Formula One fan or really an autophile at all, I now watch every single race that happens because I now understand the backstories of every driver, of every team. And so, but I noticed even watching the crew this week a little bit that you can clearly tell from us in the business, Budweiser, Stella Artois, our product placement things. So do you think that becomes a bigger opportunity?
yeah, I do. I do. I think it has to become a bigger opportunity for those brands that don't have as much reason to engage one on one with their customers. Right. That's a way of doing that and showing up in the places that resonate with their customers.
Yeah. So based on everything you said about people are going to go back to the theaters, people are still consuming in home, people are figuring out new ways to consume in home. Are there any business models that may be emerging or ways that they're thinking about the idea of ad supported versus pay per that resonate with you in any way?
Yeah, I think, the couple of things to me that are really exciting right now from a business model standpoint, because technologically we've caught up and you can have streaming services that are global. I think the ability to globally speak to people in a frictionless way is pretty phenomenal. When you look at how quickly all the services, right, are trying to roll out globally, that is a huge and critical trend that's really exciting because it also um, allows us to open up cultures and storytelling and education in a way that we couldn't do before. So the way in which our industry and the entertainment industry negotiates rights is changing rapidly because it is one global platform now across the board. So I think that is going to make the world a healthier place, actually, because you can suddenly understand different cultures in a way because you're seeing their stories that you couldn't before. And I think that smart marketers will think about ways who are global marketers, right, to really finally take advantage of global media consumption. The other
Yes.
thing
So
that
we
I
had
think
a question.
is fascinating
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
is
I'm sorry.
the business side of our business in terms of distribution changing dramatically, right? So, I talk about our industry as almost turning sideways. It used to be that, let's call it a cable network, right, would get
Yes.
distribution, right, based on which cable or MVPD or cable operators they
Yes.
had their
Correct.
deals with, right, and that would split
Yeah.
up geographically.
Yeah.
Now it's sort of been sideways where now you have to make a decision as a customer, right? Which of these services do I want? And that will determine what networks, what content you have access to. So consumers have a lot more control over what content they can access. It's not just based on some wire that happens to be available in their neighborhood.
And you said that in this conversation, at some point the consumer is going to get control, and they finally have that control, and
Yes.
it's not the worst thing in the world, right? We can all build on that and play to that, and that's going to be the expectation moving forward. Every single consumer now is a producer, they are a director, they are an actor, they are on screen talent, and they expect to have exactly what they want served to them, served to them. So I want
Absolutely.
to go to a question, but I have a follow up on this. I want to go to the question from Mary Gross, I hope. How are these CME companies capturing the customer media consumption behavior and engagement data to further understand and respond to their needs?
Well, it depends. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to ask a question. CME companies. Just define that for me.
Uh, uh, I
Mary,
don't
I don't know
know.
if you can pop something in there. Okay.
Mary popped in. Uh, I don't know. I thought content, media, entertainment companies is what I thought, but I
Let's
don't
go.
know.
Let's go with that. Let's go with that. So
Yeah.
I think, look, a lot of them, right? If you are, and I think here's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to data right now. Everybody has data on their own platform. So if you
Yes.
are HBO Max, you know what's happening on HBO Max. If you're Netflix, you know what's happening when your subscribers are using Netflix, right? But what you don't know is what's happening across everything. And that really is a bigger challenge. It used to be that Nielsen, and I worked there for many years, was able to capture the vast majority of all of the media usage that was happening because the vast majority was happening on a traditional television set. And now it's a lot harder to put the pieces together to look across all entertainment platforms in a very consistent way. Nielsen's trying their best. There's a lot of companies that are working hard at it. So I think if you are a media and entertainment company, you need to mine your data every which way you possibly can, and have, capture it the right way, have a lot of great data practices in place, have data scientists who can tell you what it means, but you also really need to have the context of what consumers are doing when they're not on your platform, and what are they doing with the other huge percentage of their time, so that you can really understand them. So I don't know if that answers Mary's question or not.
I think it does. And that idea that you're going to understand the rich consumer journey, like it's going to have more dimensions as to what it is they're watching and why they're watching, as opposed to they watched this, they didn't watch this, they watched this, they didn't watch this. So scale now probably matters more for each of these OTT services, because once you have the scale, Netflix, who you just started working with, has the scale, so they have a greater collection of data than others might who are just starting out in the OTT space. But that's going to be
Yeah, I mean,
the journey for all, right?
yeah, Netflix has scale and longevity, right? So there's also time to have built up data trends. But the good
Correct.
thing about is you don't have Netflix, right? Any of the smaller OTT services or individual services still have something that you didn't have at ESPN. They still have 100% of the data for the people using their platform at that time. And they can
Exactly.
everything going on. When you and I were working together and you're looking at a linear television network and you're depending on Nielsen, there's a benefit of everyone having access to the same information. However, you couldn't track the level of specificity and detail that you wanted to really know about your viewers, because it would fall apart because you didn't have big enough samples to work with. Now you're not working with samples. Everyone's working with 100% census of all of the usage on their own platform. So there's a lot more that you can do, and your size doesn't matter because you've always got 100% of your own data.
Yes, you always understand that journey. So I have a 22-year-old and a 20-year-old, and they look at the TV remote control as though with disdain, like it's a phone that's hung up on the wall that's got a rotary on it, right? Like it's something that we've always talked about, the idea of how is consumer behavior different from life stage. When you're younger, you don't watch a lot of TV. When you're older, you watch more TV. Getting back to the idea of TV behavior, there's something that is potentially seismically changing in terms of a not adoption of that is speaking to me as my current generation, right? And I had to remind them that's how they got a bicycle and that's how they got a car was because of television through the process. But do you think that this is a life stage situation with television or whatever TV, the old MVPD model and all of that? Or do you think it's a seismic change that it changes forever?
Yeah, I think there is a seismic change that's changed. One part of it is a seismic change that's changed forever because everybody is now going to be growing up with this technology and have access to this technology. So the whole idea of being a cord cutter isn't even something that matters anymore because like your kids will be cord nevers, right? And so
Correct.
they are growing up and have grown up in a completely different environment. I think the part that's life stage difference is always going to exist just because at different stages of your life, you have different amounts of time to watch content. You have times, when you are young and single and you're completely in control of your time and your environment. And then once you're a parent and you don't have control, then you're going to have more co-viewing that's going to happen. And then as you get older, you go back to having more control and more time. So I think the amount of time people spend with content will still be a life stage thing. But the way in which they're accessing it is not going to be that anymore. However, we can sit there and say that today and look back on this if we put it in a time capsule and somebody's going to have this same conference in 10 years and ask these same questions. And there's going to be something new that we haven't thought about that your child will then be 32 will be discussing as if what we're doing today is antiquated.
Yeah. Sorry, Cheryl. I think I lost you.
Did you? I'm here.
But
Were you looking?
yeah, okay. I call them a cord whatevers, actually, not cord nevers, because it's like.
How about what's a cord?
No. What's a cord? I don't even know what a cord is. Like, why would I have a cord? So going back to the idea of that streaming, like building on that. So what is that next level? What will we see that might transform? Certainly, I think some of the things that have been passive in terms of receiving content. There's been some trends in podcasting that have shown like the underside of what is happening on a stage that makes it feel more close and familiar. And then certainly social media has allowed for a voyeuristic aspect of people consuming the talent they want and their lives. But do you think that consumers or audiences will expect to be a part of the show more than in the past? Or do you think that it's always going to be about just give me great content and I will consume that directly?
I think people still want to be entertained. They still want to lean back. My kids also who are younger, like they don't necessarily want to be out there creating it. So I think but now there's an opportunity for those people who want to do that. But I think some of the really interesting trends that are happening right now, one, and you mentioned, podcasts, it's the whole, and we talked about this, it's the whole thing of audio. Yep. Audio has had this really fascinating resurgence.
Amazing.
And between podcasts, now podcasts are also video podcasts, if you choose that, or things like Clubhouse. Clubhouse came out of nowhere. I don't know what their numbers are. As of 2 weeks ago, they had 8 million users. They've probably doubled that in the last 2 weeks. I don't know that for a fact. But that is this really interesting, new form of audio where it's not a static podcast that was taped who knows when, but it's happening live. And talk about voyeuristic, you're listening in on conversations. And who would have saw that coming, a few months ago? So I think audio is a fascinating trend, and exactly where that's going, I'm not sure. I wish I had a great prediction for you. I think the other thing is we're going to see content get aggregated again, right? So the streaming services, you've got some very big ones, and then there's a ton of smaller ones. And you need a way to find all that content, because the other thing that's really difficult is discovery, right? Meaning discovery of the content. how do I figure out all the things that exist and where they are and how to access them? And so I think those are two very big business opportunities right now. One is the whole idea of discovery and being able to find content. I can't just click on my, old TV guide or electronic programming guide the way that I used to. And folks are trying to do it, right? It's a bit of what Apple's trying to do, and what their homepage looks like. There's a new company called Stroom that was launched recently, and they are an aggregator of small streaming services. And what you do is you'll go to Stroom and you will buy credits, and those credits let you access all kinds of smaller streaming services, and you don't have to buy 25 different subscriptions. So discovery is an interesting path. Audio's a really interesting path, and sort of the re-aggregation, which is a little bit of like what Stroom is helping to do, of all of this content so you can easily get to it.
So I'm curious, and this is totally off the grid of what we're talking about, but we're both veterans and we both have dedicated our life to studying this space. How you think about how you discover content? Is it through algorithm? Is it through projection? It's all these things, or is it through some other discovery source? For me, I listen to podcasts that talk about shows and then watch those shows. But that's how I've learned to. That's my new navigation tool, instead of the cable bar. That's how I do it. But I'm just curious from your perspective.
Yeah, mine is twofold. One is I wouldn't say listening to podcasts, but it's my own social feed, right? Whatever I see people on my Instagram or my LinkedIn, if it's more of a business thing, totally word of mouth that way. And it's word of mouth, which is what we've always used, but we haven't had access to it this way electronically, right? And then the other is definitely algorithmic, but you don't even realize that's happening. So when I'm in that lean back mode, I might sit back and turn on Netflix or a different streaming service. And I know that behind the scenes, that service is providing me recommendations algorithmically based on what they do know about me and what they know I've watched in the past. And I think I know those are getting smarter and smarter over time. And they will probably become more cross-platform to be able to tell me what I want to see.
Cheryl, as it relates to television as we used to think about it, the MVPD, the DMVPD model, clearly the audiences are going down, but there's still audiences who are loyal and will always be loyal to that experience because it's a very easy and comfortable, and it's an all buffet experience in terms of lots of channels and content. How does that, in your mind, evolve? Because those are also consumers that might age at times, and so how do you think that becomes more dynamic? Even though you have OTT services getting all the data, creating new interfaces, UI, UX, all those things, how does cable advance?
Yeah. I think that's a really tough one.
I know. I give you a stinger at the end.
It's not going to be a popular answer for somebody who's sitting at one of those companies. But look, I think that all of the major media companies that own cable networks and broadcast networks are, it's like an arms race. It's like, how fast can they transfer their viewers from their MVPD and cable services to their streaming services? That's what's happening. Because right now, those companies make so much money from the existing cable model, but the writing is on the wall faster than anyone thought. And that's why they're all trying to create their streaming services. And I think that the idea of a network as a brand is going to go away. And the networks are going to become a little bit more of a way to classify types of content. But there are going to be fewer and fewer of them, because the content will be more classified by the type of content it is and the genre it is than the name of the network that it might have aired on.
Ironically, we grew up in an era where you had 3 networks and then there was a 4th, and then we added 1,500 channels. And ironically, we're going back to probably 5 networks in the OTT space. What a journey that what is old becomes new in some ways. But I want to finish this conversation level, and for the students who are tuning in for this storied career. And by the way, thank you so much. We could talk about this forever, and I always want to hear your insights. But to give to the students who want to get into the entertainment industry, the research industry, everything around all that we do, what advice, Cheryl, would you give to them on how to do that and get involved?
I mean, what I would say is, first of all, just read everything. I'm a voracious reader. I subscribe to all sorts of newsletters. I personally find LinkedIn to be an amazing source because if I follow the right businesses and people, it surfaces the things that matter. So first of all, just be super curious. But if you're coming into this with thinking you have an interest on more of the creative and content side, that's great, but don't ignore the business and tech side. You've got to understand the business of the entertainment business, and you've got to understand how data is getting used more and more. Because 10 years ago, it wasn't really used. You would do very soft types of research to get to consumer insights, but you didn't have to think about how the algorithm might serve your content up. So you really need to understand that side of it. And conversely, if you're coming at it from the tech side of the space and you're a data scientist in the world of content or something like that, you need to understand the emotional side of the business and the emotional connection that viewers and consumers have with content. So more often than not, people are going to have to be bilingual. It's one of the things I've really focused on doing in my career. And in the last 5 years, I call myself a translator because I translate tech to the entertainment people and entertainment to the tech people. And so that's my advice, probably, is be as bilingual as you can be.
That's incredible advice. Incredible advice. If you're a tech company getting into entertainment, you see the world entirely different than if you're an entertainment company who's adding tech to get in that space. And you and I both know it's a completely different point of view. So translation, that's a great way to end the conversation that we're having. Cheryl, thank you so much for your time. And I really appreciate all those insights and look forward to hearing more. And congratulations, and looking forward to hear more about your journey with Netflix.